Okay, so you wake up feeling reasonably good, and then you check your watch. Apparently, you slept terribly. Your body battery is bankrupt and your recovery score is in the toilet, and it turns out you're only 62% prepared to face the crushing demands of Tuesday. And then suddenly, you feel exhausted. You see, there's a specific moment when health tracking stops supporting your life and starts consuming it. Most people don't notice when they cross that threshold. By the time they do, they're checking 3 apps before breakfast, they're treating normal fluctuations like medical emergencies, and making sure their body wash is high in protein. If you're over 40 and trying to stay capable for the long haul, recognizing that moment matters more than we think it does. We are living in the most data-rich health environment ever created. We can monitor heart rate, sleep, stress, glucose, temperature, O2 saturation, calorie burn, biological age, readiness, recovery, strain, and apparently our preparedness for any given Thursday afternoon. And yet all this information is making us less certain about our health, not more. That is worth marinating on. So I'm going to tell you a quick story about my first foray into wearables. The year was 1998. I was working in a high-end fitness club in downtown Toronto, and a Polar representative who was very lean and fit asked me if I wanted to try a heart rate monitor. Yeah, I did. You see, you had to wet this chest strap and hope it communicated with this watch like a tiny sweaty satellite dish. I spent the afternoon running around like a jackass trying to spike my heart rate and then proceeded to lie on the floor to see how low I could get it. Yes, I was easily entertained. What can I say? Some people had Tamagotchis and some of us had watches where the dumb animal we were trying to keep alive was, well, it was us. But that entire feedback loop, the point is, it was one number, one activity for one purpose. Then Fitbit arrived around the late 2000s and made step counting mainstream. Smartphones followed, and then smartwatches started to track sleep, stress, and oxygen saturation. Then COVID accelerated everything. Suddenly HRV trends and recovery scores became dinner table conversations and water cooler conversations. Then Whoop and Aura entered the chat, and my gosh, they were nosy as hell. Circana reported a huge uptick in fitness tracker revenue heading into 2025, with smart ring sales growing particularly quickly. The market is on absolute fire, but the question worth asking is this: at what point does tracking stop supporting your health and start consuming it? Now, first I want to give a case for wearables, lest you think this is a video just dunking on them. I want to be fair. They can help. I want to be clear there. A large 2022 umbrella review studying almost 164,000 participants found that wearable users accumulated roughly 1,800 more steps per day. Not nothing, but not earth-shattering. Notable, wearables can make invisible behaviors visible. That feedback can help people move more, sit less, and occasionally lose a couple of pounds in the process. For someone who has no idea how much they move, a basic step count can be genuinely useful. The problem begins when device moves from measuring behavior to grading your biology around the clock. And this brings up what I think is a very fair conversation about accuracy. And there is a hierarchy, there's levels to this stuff, and not all wearable data is created equal. The gap between the tiers too is much wider than most people realize. At the more directly measurable end, we have things like heart rate, steps, and broad movement. They're not perfect, but they're generally accurate enough to help guide behavior. In the middle tier, you have sleep duration, HRV trends, and skin temperature. These can be directionally useful, especially when you look at trends rather than individual days, but they're also sensitive to things like hydration, travel, illness, temperature, and plenty of other factors. And then we have the fuzzy tier, things like sleep stages, calorie expenditure, and then readiness scores, and recovery scores, and strain, and body battery, and biological age. This is what I call algorithmic parkour. Parkour! The irony is that these are often the metrics marketed the most aggressively, and they're also the most model dependent and the furthest removed from direct measurement. They are proprietary interpretations built from actual real inputs, I should say. But the interpretation is not the same thing as measurement. It's a bit like a weather app telling you the temperature, the wind, the humidity, and then confidently declaring you are 63% ready for your day. The inputs may be real, but the final score is still an interpretation. Heart rate is a measurement. Readiness is a model. Steps are a count. Strain is an interpretation. The cleaner the dashboard looks, the easier it is to become mistaken that an estimate is objective reality. So, before you hand your emotional authority to a score on a dashboard, ask yourself 3 questions. Number 1, what is it actually measuring? Number 2, how directly is it measuring it? And number 3, and most importantly, does the answer change what I should do next? If it doesn't, you may not be using health data. You might be consuming health astrology. And even if we assume the data is accurate, there's still a deeper problem at hand. When tracking changes how you feel. The clearest example of tracking backfiring isn't necessarily bad data. It's what's happening when people start organizing their feelings and behavior around a score. See, in 2017, clinicians writing in the Journal for Sleep Medicine described a pattern they called orthosomnia. Patients were arriving anxious and convinced they had sleep problems, not necessarily because they felt tired, but because their watches told them that. The anxiety around the score appeared to make their sleeping even worse, and the worse sleep produced a worse score. The worse score produced more anxiety. There's no natural exit from that loop. The device may not have been revealing a problem so much as helping reinforce one. And you cannot PR your REM cycle through sheer determination. I ran into a version of this myself. For months, I checked my sleep score first thing every morning before I would get out of bed. Eventually, I realized the score wasn't consistently giving me useful information. It was giving me new things to worry about. There were mornings where I felt fine until the app told me I shouldn't. Then suddenly I started scanning my body for fatigue. When I stopped checking, my sleep didn't get worse. In fact, it became less complicated. It actually got a little bit better, less stressful. I started asking myself how I actually felt before asking an algorithm. That's the important distinction. A device can provide information about your body, but it should not replace your relationship with your body. Now I want to talk about something called the adoption paradox. There's something that the wearable industry doesn't necessarily want us to know. The people most likely to invest in advanced monitoring are usually already healthy, already engaged people. They tend to exercise more. They tend to eat pretty well. They tend to pay attention to things like sleep. They read health content. They tend to have a little bit more money, and they're willing to spend more money on trying to improve themselves, their health. So when we observe that wearable users often have healthier habits, we need to be careful about assuming that it's the device that created those habits. Sometimes health-conscious people simply buy health-conscious products. That's what's called a healthy user bias. It doesn't invalidate controlled intervention studies showing that tracking can work, but it does complicate branding claims suggesting that premium devices are responsible for improvements in health. The people buying the premium stack are likely already health rock stars or hybrid rock stars. That was a High Rocks joke, and I'm very sorry. Anyway, the point is the device didn't necessarily create the behavior. It arrived into it. Maybe, just maybe, Cristiano Ronaldo benefits from using a Whoop. But guess what? Cristiano Ronaldo would probably be okay without knowing his heart rate was 162 when he got yet another penalty kick goal. And that matters for you specifically. Because if you're watching a channel called Durable Human, you're probably already paying attention. You're already engaged. You likely know that movement matters, protein is important, strength training is vital, and that sleep is the glue that holds it all together. The wearable may provide an extra 1 or 2%, but it probably isn't the main variable separating you from better health. Your behaviors are. The device's job is to support those behaviors, not become the behavior itself. So let's run a quick thought experiment, shall we? Take 2 people, picture 2 people. Person A tracks everything. They got a smartwatch, they've been tracking their HRV for the last 8 months, they've got a CGM, and a growing suspicion that blueberries are destroying their metabolic health. Person B, well, they walk most days, they strength train a couple times a week, they sleep decently, they eat enough protein, they eat well most of the time. Over the next year, who is likely to move their health forward? I'm going to go with person B, almost certainly, because the behaviors are the mechanism. Now, if person A is consistently doing those basics, that's great. But I'm still going to go with person B and give them what I call the chill advantage. And to be honest, I'd probably much rather talk to them at a party. See, analytics can support behavior, but they do not replace it. You cannot track your way into fitness. You train your way into it. You sleep your way into it. You healthily eat your way into it. At best, the data confirms that you're heading in the right direction. Optimization has no finish line. That is the entire problem. The optimization escalator makes it worse because it has no top floor. You start with a step counter, then you get a smartwatch, then the smartwatch tracks sleep, and then that's a gateway to introduce you to HRV. Your Pilates instructor recommends a functional health practitioner. The functional health practitioner orders blood panels, and the panels lead to biological age testing, and then the biological age results lead to supplements, and then you need more testing to determine whether those supplements improved the score. Suddenly, you're $1,700 poorer and having nightmares about slightly elevated morning cortisol. At some point, health stopped being about something you practiced and became something you audited. There is always another variable, another score, another reason you're supposedly not quite there yet. The wellness industry is structured around that feeling. That doesn't require a conspiracy theory or even bad intentions. It's simply the incentive structure. A device becomes an app. The app becomes a subscription. The subscription adds a premium insight and a premium level. The premium insight recommends additional services, products, or tests. The platform grows when your monitoring grows. Whether that growth serves your health span or their bottom line is a question worth asking. So the problem is that underneath this all is a loop that no wearable can possibly close. See, most adults already know what moves the health needle forward. More consistent movement, strength training, sleep reasonably well, eat mostly nourishing foods, get enough protein, get enough fiber, manage your stress in a decent way, stay connected to other people. None of that is secret information. The hard part is doing it consistently, especially when motivation is low and friction is high. And I get it, there's a version of the optimization trap that feels especially productive. You do the blood work, you review your sleep data, you read the research, you track your heart rate variability, you know an enormous amount about your own physiology. And somehow, the Wednesday night training session still doesn't happen. The gap between knowing and doing is where most health outcomes are decided. The readiness score cannot build an identity of somebody who trains consistently. It can't put your shoes beside the door. It can't make protein visible and convenient at breakfast. It cannot block out 2 training sessions in your calendar. It cannot remove the decision standing between you and the thing. The truth of the matter is that discipline and consistency are behavioral architecture problems, not information problems. Information is the easy part. Execution, that's the work. So I want to talk about a concept I call the minimal effective dose of awareness. That's where it leaves us, and I'm going to describe it in one word: calibration. Think of tracking as a spectrum. At one end of the spectrum is somebody that doesn't know their blood pressure, has no idea how much they move, never measured their waist, or doesn't have any idea about their physical capacity. For that person, a little tracking can be a gateway. It makes the previously invisible visible. It creates awareness, and awareness can prompt action. I sometimes have clients track food or steps or other basic behaviors temporarily because human intuition isn't as reliable as we think it is. And I'm going to be 100 with you. Sometimes eating in a way that works for me turns out not to be working particularly well. Now, at the other end of the spectrum, you have somebody that checks their sleep score before deciding how tired they are. They consult with their app before deciding whether or not to train. They've outsourced their body's literacy to an algorithm. That person may have more data, but they are not necessarily more informed. The sweet spot is enough feedback to guide behavior without making the tracker the main event. There are several useful metrics that don't require subscriptions or firmware updates. Metrics like waist to hip ratio, blood pressure, basic blood work. You should try to get that done once a year if possible. And a few practical low-cost capacity tests like push-ups. How many can you do? Getting in and out of a chair quickly, getting up off the floor without external help, grip strength, a simple walking test. And there's other real-world assessments as well, such as, can you carry your groceries without any problems? Can you climb stairs without huffing and puffing? Can you play with your kids? Can you play with your grandkids or nieces and nephews? Can you travel well? Can you move through your life without constantly negotiating with your body? These aren't glamorous metrics. They probably won't appear on Skinny Talk. They don't sync to an app, but I'm going to tell you this, they tell us a great deal about our health risk physical function, and whether your body is holding up to the real world. So prompt, act, rinse, repeat. Over time, the behavior becomes part of your identity. Less noise, lower friction, less cognitive load, a clearer next step. Your health numbers will usually improve as a downstream result, with or without a watch. So, here it is. The test for any metric is simple. Does knowing this number change what I do next? If it does, it earns its place. If it doesn't, it may just be noise dressed up as insight. And be honest with yourself. Are you actually prepared to do something useful with the numbers you're collecting? Too little awareness and you're flying blind. Too much and you've handed the cockpit to an algorithm. The goal of health is not to earn a perfect score. It's to build enough strength, energy, resilience that you can stop thinking about your health and live your life. Use the data that helps you act. Treat the rest lightly. The tracker should support your life. The life should never start orbiting the tracker. In nearly 30 years of working with people, that pattern is held. The healthiest people pay attention to their health. They don't just let it consume the day. Now, if this video leaves you wondering what to do next, I've got news for you. I created a free durable human assessment that cuts through all the noise. It focuses on a few practical measures of health and capability, not another pile of proprietary scores. You can get it using the link below, and I'll see you in the next one.